Let's talk about something scarier than a spider in your cereal, the US national debt. It's the kind of thing that keeps economists up at night and makes regular folks wonder if their kids will ever get a fair shot. Imagine waking up every morning knowing there's a financial monster lurking under the bed, and it's only getting bigger. As of 2026, it's a mind-boggling $35 trillion, a number so huge you couldn't count to it in 1,000 lifetimes. To put it in perspective, if you stacked 35 trillion $1 bills, you could reach the moon and back, multiple times. It's a sum so vast, it's almost impossible to wrap your head around. And every second, that number ticks higher, like a clock you can't stop. But the real nightmare isn't the debt itself, it's the interest. Just like a credit card bill that never gets paid off, the interest keeps piling up, compounding year after year. The government has to pay interest on every single dollar it owes, and as the debt grows, so does the interest bill. This year, the US will spend over $1 trillion just on interest payments, more than on defense or Medicare. That's right, more money goes to paying off the cost of borrowing than to protecting the country or caring for the sick and elderly. It's like taking out a loan to buy a house, then spending more on the interest than on the house itself. That's money that could fix roads, schools, or build high-speed rail, but instead it vanishes into a financial black hole. Imagine what $1 trillion could do for your community. New hospitals, better teachers, safer bridges. Instead, it's gone. Sucked away to pay for yesterday's spending. This isn't just an economist's problem, it's a ticking time bomb for the entire economy. Every family, every business, every future plan is affected by the shadow of this debt. If interest rates rise, the cost of borrowing explodes, and suddenly, there's even less money for the things that matter. Every second, the debt and its interest grow, forcing us to borrow just to pay the interest on what we already owe. It's like using one credit card to pay off another, hoping the bill never comes due. The cycle keeps spinning and the hole gets deeper. Politicians argue endlessly, but the fire keeps spreading. They bicker over budgets, point fingers, and make promises, but the debt clock never stops. The longer they wait, the harder it gets to fix. No one in Washington is seriously planning to pay this off. They know it's impossible. The numbers are just too big and the political will is too small. It's become the elephant in the room that everyone pretends not to see. The real question isn't, how do we pay it back? But how do we keep it from blowing up? The experts debate, the analysts worry, and the public wonders what comes next. Is there a way out, or are we just waiting for the inevitable? And the answer? America has a much sneakier plan. To make the debt simply disappear. But how? That's where things get really interesting, and maybe even a little bit dangerous. Every time America's national debt takes center stage, you can almost set your watch to the political performance that follows. Politicians from both sides of the aisle dust off the same two tired scripts. One side shouts, "Tax the rich," while the other counters with, "Cut spending!" These slogans are repeated so often they've become almost a ritual, echoing through the halls of Congress and across cable news screens. Both ideas sound simple, even appealing when delivered in a fiery speech or a campaign ad. But when you look at the numbers, when you stare down the barrel of a $35 trillion national debt, these solutions start to look more like wishful thinking than real answers. Let's talk about taxes. Raising them enough to make a real dent in the debt wouldn't just mean asking the ultra-wealthy to pay more. It would require eye-watering hikes on everyone, middle-class families, small business owners, even those just scraping by. The political fallout would be immediate and severe. No politician wants to be the face of that kind of pain, and voters would revolt long before the ink dried on any new tax law. What about spending cuts? The biggest slices of the federal budget pie are Social Security, Medicare, and defense. These programs are not just numbers on a spreadsheet, they're lifelines for millions of Americans and pillars of national security. Touch them, and you risk ending your political career overnight. That's why, despite all the tough talk, these areas are almost always left untouched. So, what's left to cut? Education, infrastructure, public services, the things that keep communities running. But even if you slashed these to the bone, the impact on the debt would be barely noticeable. The math just doesn't add up. And so, the charade continues. Democrats propose tax hikes they know will never pass. Republicans promise spending cuts they'll never deliver. Both sides play to their base, knowing full well that nothing fundamental will change. It's a carefully choreographed dance, designed to look like action while ensuring the status quo remains untouched. In reality, it's all theater, a spectacle meant to keep the public engaged or at least distracted while the real issues go unaddressed. The cameras roll, the speeches are made, but behind the scenes, the debt keeps growing. The uncomfortable truth? Neither higher taxes nor deeper cuts can truly fix this. The numbers are simply too massive, the political will too weak, and the consequences too dire for anyone to take real action. Meanwhile, the real solution is unfolding quietly, far from the glare of TV lights and campaign rallies. It's not debated on the House floor or shouted about in press conferences. This solution doesn't need a vote in Congress. It doesn't require a single speech or a dramatic showdown. Instead, it relies on a trick as old as money itself, a quiet maneuver, hidden in plain sight, that's been used by governments for centuries to deal with debts too big to pay. Let's break down the numbers for a moment, because the reality is more staggering than most people realize. The United States government currently owes a jaw-dropping $35 trillion. To put that in perspective, our entire economy, the sum of all goods and services produced in a year, is only about $28 trillion. That means our national debt is now far larger than the entire annual output of the country. Imagine you're a family earning $50,000 a year, but you already owe $60,500, and every month, your debt keeps growing. No matter how hard you work, the bills pile up faster than you can pay them. That's the situation America is in right now, and it's only getting worse. Every single year, the government spends more than it takes in, adding another $2 trillion to the mountain of debt. The deficit isn't shrinking, it's accelerating, and there's no sign of it slowing down. So, what about the usual solutions? To stop the debt from growing, we'd have to do something drastic, like doubling everyone's income taxes overnight, or completely eliminating the entire military budget. Neither of those options is even remotely possible, politically or practically. The American public would never accept it, and the consequences would be catastrophic. Maybe we could just grow our way out of it? Unfortunately, that's another fantasy. We'd need explosive, sustained economic growth, far beyond anything we've seen in decades. Current projections show sluggish growth at best, nowhere near enough to make a dent in the debt. The hard truth is, the numbers simply don't add up. We can't tax our way out, we can't cut our way out, and we can't grow our way out. The math just doesn't work, no matter how you slice it. Anyone who claims otherwise is either deliberately misleading you, or they just don't understand basic arithmetic. The promises of easy fixes are nothing more than wishful thinking. The truth is, the government knows this. The Federal Reserve knows it too. Behind closed doors, they're not talking about paying the debt back the old-fashioned way. That's why, when push comes to shove, they reach for a different tool, the printing press. When all else fails, they create more money out of thin air. The real strategy isn't to pay the debt back in full, it's to make the debt shrink in a way most people don't notice. By inflating the currency, the government can quietly reduce the real value of what it owes, while the public feels the pain through higher prices at the store. This is the real playbook, the one they don't talk about on the evening news. It's a strategy that's been quietly used before, hidden in plain sight, and if you look back through history, you'll see it's been used before, whenever the numbers stopped adding up, and the old solutions became nothing more than a fantasy. After World War II, the US faced a debt crisis almost as bad as today. Did they slash spending or tax everyone into poverty? No, they erased the debt with a clever two-step. First, the government locked down interest rates, making borrowing cheap. Second, they let inflation run hot. As prices rose, the value of the debt shrank, paying back old loans with cheaper dollars. The debt didn't disappear overnight, but its burden melted away as the economy and prices grew. By the 1950s, the debt-to-GDP ratio had been cut in half. The government never really paid back the WTO debt, they just made it irrelevant. It was the quietest default in history. And now, the same playbook is back. But this time, the risks are much higher. Here's the trick. Inflation quietly erases debt. If you borrow $100 and prices double, you pay back with dollars worth half as much. The government does this on a massive scale. Trillions in IOUs paid back with devalued money. The Federal Reserve helps by creating more dollars, which pushes prices up. As inflation rises, the real value of the government's fixed debt shrinks. The debt stays the same on paper, but it's worth less every year. It's not a bug, it's the main feature. This is how governments have dodged impossible debts for centuries. No official default, no panic, just a slow, silent transfer of wealth. The debt melts away, but someone always pays the price, and that someone is you. If this worked after WTO, why not now? Because today's world is very different. Back then, America was the world's factory and biggest lender. Now, we're the biggest debtor, relying on foreign buyers for our debt and goods. In the 1940s, we held all the cards. Now our creditors do. After the war, the government could force domestic savings into bonds. Today, money moves globally in seconds. If foreign investors think we're devaluing the dollar, they can dump US bonds instantly, crashing the dollar and spiking interest rates. At home, there's no post-war unity, just polarization and distrust. Engineering high inflation and low rates would spark political backlash and social unrest. The old playbook is much riskier now. The world is watching, and the margin for error is razor thin. What worked in the past could trigger disaster today. The stakes have never been higher. So, who pays for this debt-erasing magic? You do, especially if you save. Inflation is the silent tax, draining your savings value year after year. Every dollar in your account buys less as prices rise. The government wins, and so do big debtors, corporations and homeowners with fixed-rate loans. They pay back with cheaper dollars, while savers and retirees get squeezed. Asset prices, stocks, real estate, soar as people flee cash for anything that holds value. The prudent and the poor lose most. Savings shrink, and wages rarely keep up with rising costs. This isn't an accident, it's policy. The government is quietly shifting wealth from savers to debtors. It's a stealth default, and the bill lands in your lap. The rules of money have changed. Ignore them at your peril. Managing debt with inflation is like walking a tightrope over a volcano. Moderate inflation can spiral out of control. Once people expect higher prices, the cycle feeds itself. Hyperinflation is rare, but when it hits, currencies collapse. Think Weimar Germany or Venezuela. There's another risk: losing the trust of foreign creditors. The US dollar is the world's reserve currency because investors trust it. If they see us devaluing on purpose, they could dump our bonds, crashing the dollar and sending interest rates sky high. That would make borrowing unaffordable, tank the economy, and trigger a fiscal crisis. The Fed and Treasury are trying to erode the debt just enough, without causing panic. It's a dangerous balancing act with no room for mistakes. One wrong move, and the whole system could unravel. The tools are blunt, and the risks are global. Here we are in 2026, facing a debt mountain we can't climb. Taxes, cuts, and growth are fairy tales. The real plan is to inflate the debt away. The government is quietly defaulting, paying bills with ever cheaper dollars. The Fed and Treasury hope for a slow, controlled retreat, like after double one stum. But if inflation runs wild or foreign creditors bail, the music stops. That would trigger a crisis bigger than 2008, a reset of the global order. For ordinary people, holding cash is a losing game. Assets are the new lifeboats. The system now punishes savers and rewards debtors. We're living through the endgame of a decades-long debt cycle. The bill is coming due, not to be paid, but to be erased. The only question: how much will we lose in the process?